Gàidhlig the heis and they can show ní ramar omlan kint tá Kevin Brasás the tiltalach agus an am of trí van na Gaeilge ach ní ramar omlan kint a rivré an loch cur verlor in our mask so tá ahna for la Kevin Scannell mar far na technoliachta far na riverachta. He is a professor of mathematics and computer science at St. Louis University to the south. He's collaborated with dozens of language communities around the world. We know him best for his pioneering work on the Irish language, but he might talk to us briefly about the work he's done with Scots Gaelic, but also some of the African languages and less commonly used languages across the globe. His main focus has been on software to help Irish speakers use their language online, including a spell checker, a grammar checker, electronic thesaurus, and text input methods for mobile devices. Not 100% sure what that means, but I will learn. He has consulted on the Royal Irish Academy's Folklore na Nua-Gaeilge and on the new English-Irish Dictionary published by Angoon. In 2011, he founded the Indigenous Tweets project to promote the use of Indigenous and minority languages in social media, and I think it was 2012, Brian Ball, who was then an undergraduate here at Notre Dame, certainly made the top 10 and may have been the top 2 or 3 tweeters in the Irish language. So Kevin is going to give us 2 talks while he's on campus. The first one is Eadar-Ghaeilg, Scottish and Manx Gaelic resources for Irish speakers, which he will deliver right now. And this afternoon at 3:30, a lecture entitled Corpus-Based Language Technology for Indigenous and Minority Languages. So you're all very, very welcome. Thank you for attending this morning, but you're all very welcome to return for a command performance this afternoon at 3:30. Having Harvard Boyach, the Kevin as tacht chuair cuaing agus is únta go rud é go bhfuil a lehéad a scaláire a gcuine a mór a réimse a chean réimse héin sa technoliacht agus sa bhéling agus is únta go rud é go bhfuil an dá gné an gá throp tucha le chéile aige agus tá míad an sásta agus mórtasach go bhfuil sé an sop linge chuir í fáilte ribh le bhórdó.
Whisker Hugget as an Clara the show, so screed me and late Merla, so we were next to looked east of the Long Gaeilge, so generally my yichel the sort of interference on Slaumon and Merla still so bottom kinds we Corsi technoliacht, Corsi riverachta, Chang Gaeilge. So Spwal Kupro the Roth when the worthy sprag man. Nor Hosme and Chinskmal show. So Crookie man on Mappa show 3 blian nohin. Shared it on Mappa the Dini or Twitter, so Twittori, tweet all the head. Sna Chang Gaeilge. So Unya Gaeilge in Erin, Gaelic, Gaeilge Halagan, Gorham, Chin Jared Coma, Dini as Ilan Wanan Kaint as Wananish. We shared the on nach Colrate, so Colra at our shul idir na tree football. It's queer and map show eat the sort we were holic may reduce. Just the maids commersage of your shul idir na tree football. We can show you in sort of a map came sort of more abstract on mappa show you on the tree football came I guess the core of Ataru so visualization on Lesson Pobl na Gaeilge Clay Pobl na Gaelic yesh agus abal na bhaineanais sa lár áit éigean just anna beag. Agus féidir daoine dátheangacha a eáil sa visualization an seo just cúpla duine an seo agus an seo le córáte sa dáthró. Arénos. So tá mé faoi hinachar fear mór acadúil cuihín Ciarán de bhín fear tá gobar ar san na Gaeilge agus cuasaí technoliaachta sa Gaeilge blianta fada. Agus tá cúpla leathanach gréasán le Ciarán agus cead amháin pléann sé difriachtaí agus an ruí atá céime sa Eadar-Ghaeilge Gaelic agus Gaeilge. Agus tá ráiteas amháin happening on Gaelic agus Gaeilge are not names for regional varieties of Gaelic, they're regional names for the whole of Gaelic. So it's Changa Wane, Darda Ciarán. Agus sílan gur Ciarán a cheapan an téirme seo Eadar-Ghaeilg, so sílan sin é an fúnú ceart an fúnú ula is docha Gaelic mar sais téirme an teanga bháin atá. Agus sa lár seo é alt a bhí san Irish nós a scríb Ciarán Dunbar bliain amháin ó hin. Agus an smaoine a bhí ar Ciarán Dunbar ná orthography amháin a chrothú don na trí hanga chun cumarsáid sppraga. Agus taithníonn an smaoineh generálta seo lom ach barlum réiteach eile chun cumarsáid sppraga agus sin é astracán uhibriach idir na teanga. So bhfuil is cúpla rud ará faoin astracán idir Gaeilge, Gaelic agus Manx. So beidir just sláán an Amerila. So what we have really are three small communities. One sort of medium-sized community and two smaller language communities, one very, very small. And I was motivated in part to help create one larger language community, and inspired in part by those pictures that I showed of the communities on Twitter that were already communicating across language barriers. So the idea is that you can get a certain distance just as a fluent speaker of one of the three languages in communicating, but there are still barriers, and I'll show some examples in a minute, the barriers that are there. Another motivation is that, I speak Irish, not fluently, but I speak Irish, and I've been learning Scottish Gaelic. And there are some excellent books and novels in Scottish Gaelic that have just come out in the last, there's a tradition of writing in Scottish Gaelic, but some really excellent books published in the last 5 years. It struck me in struggling to read these things that the Irish language-speaking community is a whole new market that could be open to the people that are writing in Scottish Gaelic. So that's a second motivation. And then I've discussed, my son's 12 years old. He asked me, well, when I started this, he was 12 years old, and he asked me what I was working on, and I said, well, there's Irish, and I'm trying to learn Scottish Gaelic, and it's hard because all the books and dictionaries are bilingual. And he said, that's crazy. So he said, you have to go to learn Scottish Gaelic instead of just going. So that's, in a nutshell, he sort of captured the whole point, right? I want to learn Scottish Gaelic. I don't want to have to go here to here. I can just jump between the two languages. And then a more sort of technical reason behind what I'm doing is the idea that there is 10 or 15 years of work on Irish Gaelic language technology. So some of these things that Brian mentioned, spelling and grammar checkers, online dictionaries, the terminology databases, thesaurus, harder speech taggers, more sort of technical infrastructure that's there. And it's possible, given sort of bridge technology between the two languages, to transfer a lot of what's been done for Irish over to Scottish Gaelic. So again, my motivation is, as an Irish speaker, try to learn the language. And I think a lot of what I've developed is aimed at Irish speakers who are interested in the other languages, but I think there's potential for benefit in the other direction as well. Right? So taking the language that's stronger and transferring some of the tech over to the Gaelic side. And I will talk about Manx eventually. I'm not a linguist, but in going through the data, and I'll talk more about exactly what I did, I think there's huge potential, given the data set that I put together, to do deeper comparative linguistic study. And there have been, century of careful linguistic study between the two languages, but I think it's possible, given what I have, to put that on a more empirical basis. And then finally, I'd like to kind of Google Translate, for example, in Ireland has a bad reputation. And so part of my motivation is to maybe rehabilitate this technology of machine translation by deploying it in a way that is sort of tailored to the community that wants to use it, unlike Google Translate. So I'll talk more about how we're actually deploying the machine translation engine between the two languages. Okay, now that I've gotten through that, so piece of Gaelic in this. So goes with couple sampler. So Gàidhlig-Gaeilge chludan, so ar while the eigen Eadar-Ghaeilg Gaeilge a dhéanamh ar an Albert show. Brian?
But hain in a castle in Mask bun
Prata, yeah.
Prata,
Bhí sé héin healsa bh measc na prata an uair a tháinig sé iad lena gcuid gunnaí.
And a good ear. Come on. Okay. So yeah, Shachas kind of beidir focal one structure céine Eadar-Ghaeilg Gaelic. Yeah, difriochtaí, cúpla difriochtaí beag. So sé héin an hasad an measc na prátí nuair tháinig sé iad lena gcuid gunnaí. So different, well, so in terma untap and the prati uha, I guess ilra sabailga, just different octaviog and shin Eadar-Ghaeilge gunny shakas just in gunnachan Dirterlung or structure fear Earnach in Alban Eadar-Ghaeilge gunny shakas, so sort of instructor show an possessive Gaelic. So Sakat show is fader just mar kaitor Gaeilge and Cligus mo the Gaelic can stroll so show a samplella. Dar lomsa wad these jackra. So couple focal mar few mar Alamor Gaelic, the Harvey Jacker lomsa structure diffru with couple Carabrega show come on. So show him Astracon Ifagul, so Astracon be Dantic Astrahor Garmule Cosmiska Kran Theresa Schulstraben of Paris Shilshach Streetly east the Biogla Fulton, a Honic Baudelaire in the wilderness. So in retrospect, it's Fager, so Darlumsis, Focal Jacker, McCalchin, Umracht, Ach, Fager, and Nish, Wilderness, sort of Einracht, Gaeilge, yeah, so it's cognation, so Focal, Gaeilge, the Fool, McCalchin, Streetly. So,
Sure.
yeah, so, so it's sort of proof on Gurgá Cúnamh a horts the Eadar-Ghaeilg Eadar-Ghaeilg Gàidhlig-Gaeilge the Cummersáidí and the Eadar-Ghaeilg. Now, again, Cana, sort of contrived example upon this piece of Filiochta. So is still good and range to show Changa East Jacker and again, Cana, like a lore different up the I guess and Eadar-Ghaeilg Crave Shakas Kron. Eadar-Ghaeilg or the Raw, Idrin, and Eadar-Ghaeilg. Come on. So in Rud, so of course the Astrakhan Rivera, Chulurud, Bunnahe, Corpus Eadar-Ghaeilg. So by show on Chain Kane, Corpus more Eadar-Ghaeilg Crochu Eadar-Ghaeilge agus Gaelic. So an ibis mo a viagam Neil Moron takes in a Eadar-Ghaeilg Horby. So Marshin Ishe Oram just Chulurud Hurlahela. Marhampla Astrakhan Bogari Firefox or something office. So Cormisha Gaeilge Firefox, the Dramella, I guess we group Ella, Gaeilge Gmail, I guess LibreOffice, I guess Bogari more raw, I guess Dram in Albin we're in an Overcana, so Vimar and on the Hastrakon occur the Hela are parallel corpus. Come on the Shin Bibla Agan Eadar-Ghaeilge Farir Neil and Bibla Gaelic or foil Eadar-Ghaeilge Fulahar just a couple of hour Tal Bibla Gaeilge Himlon or foil Eadar-Ghaeilge Neil a couple of hour. So and Shin just pull a tweets Aimroad Eadar-Ghaeilge Wikipedia articles, so Vimeo Gober Lashon Wikipedia in Nalek, I guess Quirme, Astrakhan, couple of alt awesome Wikipedia poems, prayers, Kulurut. So Nerenle the Nismol Kate Mila segments so Nirwalam Aberts no sentence per Toshkuil Urint just piece of yoga on the hymnal Nismol the million Fako Garantahave. So Corpus Nasar more. Okay, so just maar funche technool an ibis mol tarish on Corpus show Hurlkela na goil Kudus mol the text in the Astrakhan Asperna. So Corsi Astrakhan or Rivera Google translates into Spanish I guess Berna, Frankish I guess Berna, Spater chorus Hurlhela Corpus Eadar-Ghaeilge Avi Astraha Gajirach Berla Spanish, Berla Frankish. So Kasho just Shakas so Klij Anviog Hulurud Astraha As Berla Gajian Eadar-Ghaeilge Gnavsbach. I guess it's 5 no worry show. So just bháil an cúpla rud ará faoin asfrin curciige astracán riomhar. So is féidir focail a chur le chéile the mó statisticú. Sa chaisio tá an dá cheanga cognates, uaireanta or go minic, so is féidir na focail a chur le chéile Gaelic níos éasca. So an curciige tá sé bunathe athruithe litrathe mar shampla in Gàidhlig-Gaeilge nuair bhíonn SG on this SC in Gaeilge agus CHD Dominic Dera focail is CHT in Gaeilge. An sin go bunasach tá folklór agan tar éis an céim seo. Le gach focail in Gaeilge na Halban an dul le focail nó níos mó na focail amháin in Gaeilge. An sin tar éis an folklór seo ar le chéile caithfidh tú astracán dhéanamh. So seo é an chuid eile atá bunathe ar statisticí. So is féidir dul trid an abert in Gaelic ó clé jazz. So den chluideas mó is féidir astracán a dhéanamh taiscúil na teanga Eadar le chéile. Is féidir astracán a dhéanamh focail amháin tar éis focail amháin. Uaireanta ní féidir é sin a dhéanamh, so just mar shampla amháin. In our dimple in Gaeilge an struchtúr atá an go minic in Gaeilge na Halban council court or in the structure cosol sin in Gaeilge cumá ach bunathe ar corpus nó statisticí atá an seo an struchtúr atá an mar astracán air. So tá sort of reordering on ordering atá on. So the purpose, the pronoun atá on the show is cuinched and possessive in Gaeilge sin. So tá reordering riachtanach. So the folklore agan agus Thomas dul trid an abert clé jazz. Agus an aibit is mó na go bhfuil golóir astracán ar gach focail. So mar shampla fiú bhfuilach ga ocail ga astracán ar gach focail Gaelic mas abert, gná abert beidir fiche focail be níos mó milliún astracán. So an spricla tá agan na an tastracán is dócha crowd. Agus seoin an céim atá bunathe ar statisticí. So as na milliún astracán as na féidirachtaí go léir cad é an ceann amháin atá is dócha. So, okay, Arish I mér is dócha, so bhí mé súil le luchtdéisseacht dá cheangach so craid mé na samplaí seo I mér le. Okay, I have to switch gears. So a Markov model is, the idea is that languages aren't random, and the computer statistically can often predict the next word that's coming based on the two previous words. And it's never going to be perfect, but everything is based on probabilities. So I'll just have some examples that sort of illustrate the way Markov models in language So, for example, if you see the two words, the, to, and I ask you, what are the words that could possibly follow that? Well, you could look in a big corpus of English, which I did, hundreds of millions of words, and you can just count, okay? Of all of the times that the to appears in an English corpus, count up the examples of the words that appear after it, and compute percentages. So in the corpus I looked at with 100-something million words, just over 4% of the time, the word that follows the to was men. Fine. Right? Just over 3% of the time, the word that followed the to is of. Okay? These are all plausible. The two countries, I think this was a newswire corpus, so the two sides. So the statistics depend on the corpus you look at, of course, right? So corpus of literature or corpus from the 18th century, you would see different probabilities and so on, but basically this is the idea. So you have a probability distribution over all of the words of English based on how likely they are to follow these two words. And you can do this for any pair. So here's another one. What do you think the most likely word to follow these two words in English would be?
That.
Exactly. In fact, this was much higher than I thought it would be, yeah. So I had the same intuition, but I would have guessed more like 50%. But in fact, 87% of the time in this corpus, that is the next word. Next, any guesses?
Of.
The fact is, yeah, the fact of is next, yeah. So, but 3% and 2%, which is a little bit surprising. And this is in part why computers, so we all have this intuition, and I think, I'm not a sort of neuroscientist or anything, or a linguist, I have no knowledge of this field, but my intuition is that we have some sort of Markov model in our brains. But oftentimes, that said, oftentimes the statistics that come out of actually looking at a corpus don't match up exactly with our intuitions, even as native speakers of a language. The fact remains just under 1%, the fact was, and so on. All right, a couple more. So the United, this is all lowercase, I should say that, so don't pay attention to the case. I take all of the words and I make them all lowercase. So United States, just over half.
Kingdom.
Kingdom second. Third.
Linguist.
Yeah, United Nations, 8%. Now, I like this example because it really illustrates the dependency on
Colours.
the corpus.
Colours.
Oh, very subtle. I don't think that made my top. Yeah, but that's because it's a newswire corpus and maybe not. Maybe if you looked on Twitter or Facebook or something like that. But yeah, I like this example because this was, I wish I'd made careful notes of the corpus, but I think it was US-based newswire text, in which case you expect to see United States much more often than United Kingdom and so on, but if you looked at BBC Newswire or something like that, I'm sure it would be flipped. Or some chance it would be, the probabilities would certainly be different. And then one last technical point. The examples so far were sort of easy. What about these two? Off is to your first instinct, so when I looked at this example, in a 100 million word corpus, those two words never appeared together in 100 million words of English. And that happens. Happens all the time, right? Even with words that sort of clearly are not sort of syntactically a problem together, right? It just happens that they didn't appear. And again, maybe it was because I looked at a newswire corpus. If I had taken a corpus of more informal text or literature, possibly you would have seen this, but it didn't appear. And you have to deal with this problem somehow. So it's just part of the technical hurdles you have to deal with. And the technical term we use is back-off smoothing, but it's a very simple idea. If you want to know the probability of a word following button fell, and you don't have any statistics to allow you to compute those probabilities, simple idea is, well, what are the words that are most likely to come after fell, right? And I didn't compute this actually, but presumably off would be very high on the list, which sort of matches your intuition that off would be a strong candidate to follow button fell. So that's all we mean by back off smoothing, is instead of looking at the two previous words, look at the one previous word, and presumably the word fell appears some number of times in the corpus, and so on. Or you get a bigger corpus. So yeah, a couple words on that. So everything is based on a corpus of Irish. So we're translating here into Irish. And again, so we have lots of, maybe 1 million candidate translations of a Scottish Gaelic sentence, and you want to pick the one in Irish that's most likely. That's good news because it means the statistics can be based on an Irish corpus, and there's a lot of Irish text on the web. So we don't have to do very much with the Scottish Gaelic side at all. We don't need the statistics on that side, and we can just look at the Irish corpus. So I've been crawling, I have a web crawler that's been running for almost 15 years, collecting everything that anybody writes online in Irish, and in total there are something like 150 million words of Irish on the web right now, which is a remarkable number to me. When you're talking about a language community with, well, it depends how you count, of course, right? 1.6 million speakers, but in any case, there's a tremendous amount of Irish online, and that means that the statistics that we gather for this guessing game, 2 words and then predicting the most likely next word, becomes much easier. And that's the reason that this technology is going into Irish and not in the other direction, because there is probably less than 3 million words of Gaelic online. So, okay, so cúpla sampla. Teangólaíochta. So, an ear. So a focal na frasa. In Gaeilge na Halban, an ear. Cosúil leis focal Gaeilge, an ear. Ach, tá difriochtaí in Gaeilge nachhfuil in Gaeilge na Halban. So an ear, Cillian sé, so séir atá an siúl, sheer, turdy Willigal. Mach an glee an ear, I guess Aaron Costa here in Gaeilge. So mas mian lat astrachan the end of Gaelic, Gaeilge Cahaltu an focal ceart fic amach. Like a sinnig gajira on the road a yenin na statistiki. Okay, so tigan an reeve clar, well, so Nílach Beiger Astrachan the one they're glee, so focal cana in Gaeilge. So statistiki, so corpus Gaeilge is minic will an ear tach tareish glee. So Marshin is Beiger Lish reeve clar an ear fic amach. I guess an costa here comma an frasashin an cochata. So corpus Gaeilge. So it's bua ta an the difriochtaí the end of mach. Okay, so sample ella, so focal one at Hardy Jacker in Alec. Countcho, no. So Oorntach is alt, na. So marhapla glor na leil. Right, so litru at air focal shin in Gaeilge na Halban nan. So Oru ta kuj dan alt. Oorntach is possessive in the. I guess Oorntach is dá atá an, so dá rih an mó Gàidhlig atá. So sa cás seo séir atá an mó Gàidhlig. Agus just a rís bunathe na statisticí is féidir. So seo an puinte is táhachtí. Is é sa corpus, is é ná an tastracán is coitianta. Wad níos coitianta na dá mar astracán. Ach, sa cás seo pas go bhfuil gur léir go bhfuil mó Gàidhlig tar éis focail seo is féidir dá around. Okay, sample one ella. So aber as an corpus, creds no not creds, croc shiv and rabin. So sort of worked out example and show. So Eadar-Ghaeilg showing the hastrachan gach focal. So croch shiv sort of punch táhachtach weren't the Killian shiv I guess weren't the two in Noach and the Halban. On is féidir trí féidirachtaí and sin well tá mé géirí an séú agus uirú a bhíú an seo. So Killian an focail seo Francach ach ar nó tossing sé le R, so níl éon séú in Noach and the Halban sa cás seo ach caithú an séú na uirú aroundú san astracán. Agus sampla eile ar an radan. Agus a rís caithú an focail ceart aroundú. So it's Albert, gar Albert ní seo nílach ceithre focail ach gná céine tá trichas sé astracán. Agus ar nó an tastracán is fearr sa chéad cas ná croch siv an Francach. nó béidir croch tú an Francach. Tá sé an Jackar siv tú around sa bhealach ceart I chula cás. An haríis, so tá mé géirí an puinte seo a dhéanamh maidir leis an séú. So sa cás seo is léir gur siv an Francach an tastracán ceart, agus sa dara cás is léir gur an Francach an tastracán ceart. So puinte bealach antáhachtach má tá tú géirí astracán nífa a chrá. So séir tá agan na folklore, so chuirfí mé scríb mé folklore Gàidhlig-Gaeilge mar chuid don poker show. Twitter stream, so tá lachanach gréasán agam bhfuil tweets as Gaelic. The cún of astracán atá dírithe Gaeilgeoirí. Sividir lín cosúil le Google Translate, so it's féidir rud éigin na closecríomh in Gaelic, no copy and paste, agus astracán áil, so dénig mé demo gan nó méid. And sin cúpla tógra happening go mór lumsa, clústóir agus multi-dict, tugra de chuid saomhór ostig in Alban, Ilan Skihanach, tugra, so Stephen Grayson a croci cuivine o Daniela, far more riverachta agus technoliachta saomhór ostig le brí ta fada. So séir dá na achánaí atá dírithe ar Alamóirí teangacha. So well, dénig mé demo cumá. So cód agus sonraí oscailte agus siar an aisce web service. En sin lui mee an sort of marga nua a oscailt the scríb nóirí in Gaeilge na Halabin, so tá cúpla cara bant úsáid as an riomhchláir seo chun Gaeilge a chur cúpla leabhar Gaelic fi láthair. So feicimid. Cuirsaí technúla is féidir ifricha a chur ar an cáilíocht, so word error rate, so ní raibh agam an mach daoine as rinne na riomhóíochta an seo, so is cuma live faoin uimhir seo is dócha ach is ráta má é seo. Beidir Béarla from Nomade. So it's typical to do evaluations of a system like this. You can do it with Google Translate, you can do it with any system. And you have a corpus of sentences in the source and the target language, and you can just run them through your program and do a numerical comparison between the two. So that's word error rate is one way of doing this. That's a very good word error rate, and in part because the languages are very close to each other, and it's a relatively easy translation problem. And in fact, so much so that one approach, a baseline algorithm for translating is just don't do anything, right? Just leave it as it is. And that's not a great baseline, but it's really good for the complexity of the algorithm in question, which is to just do nothing. That said, to assign numbers like this, which is typical if you write research papers about machine translation, is actually an underestimate of the real performance of the system, in part just because of initial mutations. So that's why I mentioned the statistical approach solves the initial mutation problem in part, but it still makes mistakes. And the reality is that if you get the mutations wrong in a couple of examples, it doesn't really make the translation harder to understand. So, and the word error rate doesn't take into account just the difference in mutation, for example, so that's just treated as wrong. So that's one reason. And then the other reason is that there are structural differences that we don't take into account with the system. So, Hobby, Haitian, and Nish, the translation engine would translate that as ta, me, tishkin, nish, again, word by word, and so on. Whereas, again, and this goes back to the issue of translations from a common English source. If you ask somebody to translate, I understand now, maybe, this might be the translation that you get. And of course, those are very different. The output of the system is very different from the one provided to you by a translator, but it's no harder to understand. I'm just as happy with Tame, Tishkin, Nish, setting aside any small semantic differences. So just some screenshots and so on, so you can see what we produced. So this is what the dictionary looks like. It's really just a glossary. The first draft was created using these sort of statistical methods, but I checked all of the entries. So I went through the corpus and essentially did what lexicographers do and went through the full list of 16,000 words and verified all of the translations. And then added some notations. So you'll see, I don't know how easy it is to see, but we have this dangerous bend road sign. This is notation that comes from mathematics, it's my background. In the 60s, the French mathematicians who wrote a series of books where they kind of laid out whole fields of mathematics in a very disciplined way. And they're called the Bourbaki school, and they had a very particular style and so on. And one of their inventions was this dangerous bend road sign. So if this, in part of the development of the mathematics, there was something tricky that you might miss, they would put this sign in there. So that's the notation that I use for false friends in the dictionary. There's a dagger when a word doesn't appear at all in a corpus in the Gaelic online corpus. Nobody's using this word online anywhere. And that's just a hint that maybe if you're studying the language, it's something that's less important. And then I have the star, which is different than the false friend. So these are words. What I did was I picked out the 100 most frequent words. So what I really did was I looked at the 1,000 most frequent words in Gaelic. And of those 1,000, 900 out of 1,000 to a fluent Irish speaker are understandable, or something that you could figure out based on either being a cognate with Irish or being a cognate with English, right? So I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but lots of words are easy to understand, even if it's not the same in Irish. So setting those aside, there are only about 100 words out of the top 1,000 most frequent that an Irish speaker would find opaque just by looking at it on the page. And so we put stars by all of those. So that's the dictionary. This is a screenshot of Eadar-Ghaeilg.com, which was created by the great Michal Mechura. He's a Czech fellow who's lived in Ireland for many years. And basically, if you've used any websites in Irish, Terma.com, the old Focal.com, the new Tanglin.com, I can't think, Loganon.com, basically all of these sites are the work of Michal. So he's a sort of brilliant designer of websites. So he took my engine and sort of created this Google Translate-like front end. So it's possible to just type something into the search box and get a translation, but sort of in part with my prompting, and I think, again, his sort of good design taste, what we did was, the idea here is to help Irish speakers who want to learn Gaelic. So instead of Google Translate, which just gives you the translation, and you kind of forget about the source entirely, what you have at the bottom of the screen is the focus is on the Gaelic, the original Gaelic text that you put in. So that's what's in the bold text here. And then underneath are the translations, essentially word by word, smaller text, lighter font. And this way, if you're like me and you're really trying to learn, you can just read the Gaelic, and when you get stuck, or if there's something, a structure you don't understand, you can just, your eyes can scan down. So to me, it's a really effective solution. And that's what I was referring to at the beginning when I talked about sort of finding creative ways to deliver machine translation results. And then this is the Twitter stream. Again, it looks like Twitter, but so it shows Gaelic tweets. But you can take your mouse and you can put your mouse over a word that you don't understand, and it gives you the translation into Irish of that word. So here, there's no mouse on the screen, but I was hovering my mouse over this word, Lara, which is like Lairach or Lairán in Irish. It's the word they use for sieve Idirlín, sieve of Grayson. So again, no Irish unless you want the help, and then you put your mouse over the word that you need help with. So this is closed store and multi-dipped. This is the project from Sal Morostig, which is great if you're teaching languages or learning languages. So I can watch a video in Gaelic with the transcription underneath, so I can read it as I'm listening to it. And again, as an Irish speaker, if there's a word I didn't understand, I can click it, and in a second window, in a separate frame actually, it shows the results from the Eadar-Ghaeilg dictionary, so the dictionary we created. Okay, so I don't know how I'm out of time. Let me just say a couple words about Manx, if that's okay. So again, for this audience, you all know probably Isle of Man. So in chorus literature, fashe am de froel ar fad, so Tori me sampa gan no maid. Sna shachtoji well, sna hopta di dirt UNESCO gwil gwr an wan in this boss, sna shachtwiti. You know, on the island, if you talk to people, they'll say, okay, so the mythology is the last native speaker died in 1972, and so on, but the people on the island will tell you that there's sort of an unbroken strand from that last generation of native speakers, and the people who are reviving the language now learned Manx from that last generation to fluency. And there are now immersion schools on the island and a really active community of speakers. That said, it's a small place and a small language. There are, I say probably, but certainly less than 500 fluent speakers. So here's our example. Just Ylesagat der Shin, the Roo, the Rich Cat, Talmich Galer, Asa Mauer, Chil. Nahian Shiv on Lauer. So Shoed Lauer Wan Aviagam Snatrihanga. So Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. Yeah, so also Neil say Royaker and Cancho Hishkent. Yeah, Hamel. Tashe Unrud came in the Halabin Koma, Nyart, just different so litru. With Dorch and Cat. We shared it on the Ille, so called me the Ille. So Neil Sagan is Nidocha cognate and Fockelship, Killian She Krakow to Aspebauer. Marinos, so Tamegiri just the worthy cane again of the Manamish. So Sakasho Tom Bibler Fab or Foil. So Alice in Wonderland. So it's like Brian Stoll, Chilean sort of Lech, Moore, Sail, the Manamish. Sort of one-man wrecking crew in terms of revitalizing the language over the last 30 years. It's Dowlum Brian on Tanga, O and Gluin Yerenach, the Kaintori Lifa. The European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages, actually Astraha, Gamananish Gama, and Shinarish, just Hularud, Mascon, software translations, dictionaries, Kasakasho, Nismo Nishaska Mila, Abert, you know, Kudzwa Asan Bibla. Ach, PCL Kama, because Biognach million focal or Dahave. I guess Arish sample one on 5 show the on focal Gaeilg Kart around and Tashe Jacker, Toshkoil and Litru ko Ach. So sample 1, 2 and cat, so I don't know how to pronounce Manx, but a couple of focal Gàidhlig-Gaeilge. Diggenshiv. So, Jew shared it on Dole.
So Banya Ur, yeah.
Yeah, Banya Ur, yeah, something massacre, Solaire.
Dole na catch like Banya Ur.
Yeah. The Ga Okol they Gàidhlig and so Jew I guess Ur Kama shared it on the Ur and Clig. So ta Ga Okol Kachanta in Leoga, so Tashi Harvey Jacker, so showing well Astracoma 1, Dole and Captain Banyo or Gàidhlig-Gaeilge, Canela Beam Sul Tree Kera Ur. Tashi Niseska and Abert Ra Asard. So Beme Shul so sais Cara Brega Shin Istoka or Shul Sakasho so Imihe no
Archiúil.
Archiúil, yeah.
It's your funnel, you know, Archiúil.
Yeah, Gàidhlig. So
Yeah.
níl bro hostel sin nach sin é. It's river atá an. So trí chera úr the click. Mauritius, you know, so bunher statistic is feature banya úr a oil and sin trí chera úr is there gravation an tastrafan chart. So tá an parallel corpus agam tá beag nach lachjente leis an folklore agus bhálinn na rudí go léir na folklore Eadar-Ghaeilg agus an Twitter Twitter stream a seola Marta sa bliain tógin. Agus tá mé buíoch the golóir daoine éagsúla as Alban agus as bilingual as Aquaní agus cúnamh mór or stuff. So sin é.
Míle
Good, very good, huh? Like it?
Gurmad.
Kira a hog se se liber. Tudíise.
Hmm?
Ke fád agus tatú gabbarne.